tonight's big stories. The Supreme Court rules on a complaint against Meralco for disconnecting a customer's electricity without prior notice. The High Court says Meralco must give their customers written notice of disconnection at least 48 hours before cutting off power supply.
Today marks a year into President Bongbong Marcos's administration. What are the hits and misses? We'll dissect PBBM's first year of presidency with political analyst Richard Haydarian.
And the final phase of the terminal reassignments at the NAIA takes effect tomorrow. We'll break it down for you later on.
Welcome to the show. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Maricel Halili.
And I'm Sean Yao. Guys, have you ever received a disconnection notice from Meralco?
Yes.
Really?
Me also.
Very stressful.
Really? Why? You forgot to pay your bills?
Yeah, it's one of those things na you're
just
so
overlook.
busy, you just overlook it. And then
And I know,
suddenly
like,
there's
in a-
something in the mail.
Diba, in the condo kasi, diba, yung mailbox na sa baba. So
Oh,
sometimes you
exactly.
don't really
Same for
check.
us. Same for us.
Yeah, and then sometimes stick your hand in and not all of it comes out, right? And then next month you're
it's
like,
just a lot of bills that you tend to ignore, and then
Yeah.
suddenly you're going through all of them, and there's like 5 disconnection notices.
right. What I like is that the envelope is a bit different if it's a disconnection notice, right? Well, for everyone who has received the same, the Supreme Court has ruled that Meralco must give at least 48 hours written notice before cutting power connections. Here's what we know. The Supreme Court ruled that the power distributor violated RA 7832 when it cut off the electricity supply of a consumer without prior notice, upholding the earlier decision of the Court of Appeals. The court emphasized that Meralco must give written notice at least 48 hours before disconnection. The High Court also found that Meralco violated due process when it cut off electricity of a customer on the same day as the disconnection notice. Meralco has been directed to pay 50,000 pesos in temperate damages and 100,000 pesos for exemplary damages. So, how did this all start? Well, this particular case dates all the way back to 1999 and stemmed from a complaint for damages filed by Lucy Yu, a private complainant. Yu claimed that Meralco representatives forcibly entered the premises of their family business in Valenzuela, and after inspection, Meralco issued a notice of disconnection, then immediately disconnected the electricity supply of their factory and their residence. Yu filed her complaint before the Valenzuela City Regional Trial Court Branch 172, which ruled in her favor in 2018. Meralco then elevated the case to the Court of Appeals, but the CA also ruled in favor of Yu in 2020. The power distributor next went to the Supreme Court and received the same verdict.
Meralco has meanwhile released a statement on the Supreme Court's decision. Meralco said they have not officially received a copy of the ruling, but noted that they will respect and abide by the High Court's decision. The power distributor also noted that the incident in question happened in 1999. They clarify that they now have a policy to serve a 48-hour prior notice before disconnecting to power service, to comply to due process requirements.
Right, so again,
Matagal na pala tong case na to.
1999.
It goes all the way back to 1999.
and the first ruling was 2018. I think that's actually one of the more interesting things here. Guys, 19 years para ma-settle to. Nagbago na rin
Tagal.
yung policies
because it
ng
went all the
Meralco.
way up to Supreme Court, yes. And you're right, the policies have changed.
No, but the first ruling from the Regional Trial Court was in 2018. Right. As Meralco said, they released a statement. They also said na nagbago na naman and they already give the disconnection notice and that it should suffice and that this disconnection notice is given 48 hours before
Yes.
they actually
I
disconnect.
did get it. Yeah, correct.
Oo.
Yeah, that's fair.
Actually, hindi nga ako na-disconnect nung nabigyan ako ng disconnection notice. It's because the condo was empty. And parang halos wala naman talaga nagko-consume. So the bill was
kala
very
mo,
small.
false threat lang. Well, after a landslide victory in the 2022 national elections, guess what? We're a year into President Bongbong Marcos's administration. Today marks officially his first year in office. He's all set to deliver his second State of the Nation address next month. In the meantime, let's take a look back at his commitments over the past year. President Marcos took office with the burden of reviving an economy heavily battered by the COVID-19 crisis. His economic targets included GDP growth between 6.5% to 7.5% for 2022. We managed to exceed that at 7.6%. He also vowed to continue reforming the tax system, just like President Duterte. And we're also seeing that now with all these proposals, most recently of the tax on sugary drinks and salty food. And then there's also the plan to tax digital services. On foreign affairs, Marcos insists he's carrying on with the previous administration's independent foreign policy, but most experts see him as having run back towards the arms of the United States. A key point to this is the fact that he allowed American troops access to 4 more military sites in the Philippines under EDCA, and the fact that he's visited the U.S. twice since becoming president.
On the health front, President Marcos managed to succeed in keeping the country open and free from lockdowns. He says he wants a Center for Disease Control and Prevention and a Virology Institute. Bills creating those 2 agencies are now pending in Congress. And with Vice President Sara Duterte as education chief, the Marcos administration also successfully brought back in-person classes. The review of the K-12 program and English as a medium of instruction are now also underway.
President Marcos mentioned 19 priority bills, at least 2 of which are making buzz. That's the pension reform for uniformed personnel and mandatory ROTC. The Maharlika bill and the SIM registration law were not part of his initial priority measures, but they've been certified urgent and will most likely be included in his second SONA. Pero kung grading ang pag-uusapan, girls, eto ang score ni PBBM from different sectors. For Senate President Mig Zubiri, pasado si PBBM. Here's why.
He's doing a very fine job. If you ask me for a grade, 8 out of 10, I give the President 8 out of 10. Number 1, napakasipag niya. From day 1, he started this mandate running. He started it running. Of course, he's being hounded by inflationary problems, problems of high cost of goods, high cost of food and fuel, some of which was beyond his control. Yung fuel was about Ukraine and the Russian war, which again also added to the inflationary cost of food.
For the Employers Confederation of the Philippines, there's hits and misses. But overall, here's their assessment.
Ayoko magbigay ng grado, pero kami very satisfied. Meron kami mga issues na hindi kami agree, pero by and all, we are satisfied with the new administration.
For Agri Group, Sinag, pasado din ang ating concurrent DA Secretary. The group says Marcos should stay on as Agri Chief for at least a year since, quote, marami pa siyang kailangang gawin sa DA. The Alliance of Concerned Teachers, meanwhile, believe that there's a lot to improve on when it comes to the Marcos administration's handling of the education sector. ACT Teachers Party List Representative Franz Castro explains why.
Yes, as regards to the kasi sinasabi nga ng mga teachers as regards to their yung kanilang mga kahilingan on salary increase and payment of the delayed benefits, talagang failed, bagsak. Needs improvement. First year pa lang naman, di pa rin talaga nating binabagsak. So kailangan nilang mag-improve on a lot of criteria.
All right, well, here to help us dissect PBBM's 1 year in office, we have on the line our resident political analyst, Richard Haydarian. Richard is a senior lecturer at the UP Asian Center. Hi, Richard. Good to have you again.
My pleasure. My electricity is still around, so let's do this.
Hindi ka naman napatulan, no? All right, so look, you're our resident geopolitical and foreign affairs expert, right? So I might as well ask you straight up, how would you grade President Marcos in the past 1 year?
Well, I mean, of course, everything depends on what were you expecting, no? And I think for a lot of people, especially the critics who were expecting a lot of continuity, not necessarily in the best ways, between the excesses and the mistakes of the previous administration, supposedly carrying over into 2023, I think many were pleasantly surprised. So on the foreign policy front, I think many were worried that President Marcos Jr. will push President Duterte's fruitless pivot to China to its logical conclusion. That did not happen. President BBM tried his best to give China a chance to revive the BRI investment projects, to make sure that we manage and resolve our disputes in the South China Sea effectively. But very clearly, after his trip to China earlier this year in January, he realized that that bilateral relationship is nowhere close to the rhetoric that China always raises, which is supposedly a golden era between Philippines and China. And since February this year, and since his trip to Japan and later on to the United States, we have seen that the president is doubling down on our traditional alliances, but not necessarily wanting to still burn the bridges with China. So I think in terms of foreign policy, he has put the Philippines on a better footing. In fact, I would say it has put the Philippines on a strategic sweet spot. Because when it comes to EDCA, we have discussed this a lot, it's not final yet. We can still dribble it. We can still configure it to make sure it's not too aggressive towards China. But it's strong enough to make sure the Philippines has some bargaining chip and some sort of negotiating leverage vis-a-vis China. Now, on the domestic front, though, I think the best way to gauge in an objective manner, in comparative manner, look at, for instance, the World Economic Forum's the Global Economic Competitiveness Report. Actually, the Philippines ranking went down over the past year. Now, part of that because of what he inherited from Duterte administration, massive debt, massive fiscal imbalance, all sorts of problems. But the reality is that if you look at these objective indicators and studies, it shows that one of the big problems in the Philippines is governance. We lack good governance. We lack fiscal transparency and sustainability. So that's why I'm not very impressed with the whole Maharlika Fund brouhaha, because my sense is it might have some ideological, political, or PR create some PR benefits for the president, but I don't think it has been very positively received by economists at home, by a lot of observers abroad, given the reputation that the Marcoses have given the historical baggage and everything that we have. And the president has not forwarded any significant initiative when it comes to fighting corruption, graft, and all sorts of bad governance problem we have had over the decades. So I think on the domestic front, I'm not as impressed as on the foreign policy front. Nevertheless, I think kudos to President Marcos. At least he realized and recognized that the drug war of President Duterte has to be recalibrated, more human rights friendly, more human life friendly, more surgical, more targeted. Also, on issues like, for instance, crackdown on insurgencies. I think that we had this relative recalibration of let's just call it what it is, a red tagging hysteria that we had under the previous administration. So overall, I'll definitely give him a passing grade, but I think he could have done way better if the president was as decisive or was as effectively corrective as he was on the foreign policy when it comes to key domestic policy issues.
Right.
Right,
Can I just point out that, wow, coming from Richard, that's high praise, huh?
Yeah,
He said,
passing grade.
correct. Like you said that Marcos put us in the sweet spot when it comes to our foreign allies. So wow.
Richard has been consistent in saying that. He's actually kept surprising us over and over again here on The Big Story by actually saying, his geopolitical moves, at least in that sense, has been good. Now, speaking of more on the domestic front, Richard, the president won via this whole premise of unity with the UNIT team. And as we have seen within the first year, less than 1 year into his term, things have started getting a bit cloudy, that whole mess. So with the House leadership, with Martin Romualdez, of course, his executive secretary, and the seeming disagreement between Martin Romualdez and Sara Duterte and Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Some people are saying it's a bit too early for that to happen. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the thing is this, when President Marcos did not give the defense secretary position to his UNIT team partner, something that many were expecting, including the current vice president, when Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, the former Speaker of the House, former president, did not get the Speaker of the House position that she was expecting, we knew that was going to create some fault lines. And that happened even before then President-elect Marcos Jr. assumed office. So the roots of these tensions we're seeing right now was already laid down early on. And if you look at it from a political standpoint, in fact, from a good Machiavellian standpoint, it makes sense for President Marcos to make sure that some of the key positions in the government, some of the key positions outside the executive branch, is held by people that he feels he can fully trust and work with, or are people who are trusted and respected internationally, or at least have the necessary expertise. So, for instance, on defense secretary position, now it's with Gibo Chodoro after being with the former IFP chief. And I think Gibo Chodoro is someone that many experts, many defense officials around the world are very comfortable with. And I think he has all the merits and CV to be a right defense secretary. On the Speaker of the House position, we can look at how good the dynamic is, the symbiotic dynamic between Speaker of the House, Martin Romualdez, and his cousin, first cousin, Marcos Jr. So there was a cost to that, to ticking some of the boxes, because that meant alienation. But look at it, despite all of the brouhaha and all of the kerfuffle, still, Sara Duterte is not opposition. I mean, they're still keeping a kind of a respectful demeanor, and I think President Marcos Jr. has been trying to keep things on an even keel. I think when things can get a little bit more tricky is later on, especially if we see resolution on the front of, for instance, the Leila de Lima case. I think if Leila de Lima were to be freed, or Marcos Jr. were to allow ICC, International Criminal Court, to conduct investigations about former President Duterte's drug war, then I think some of these fault lines could become much more pronounced and much more deep. No, not to mention the cabinet reshuffle is not complete yet. Again, I don't want to be Marites, but we've been hearing the name of Mar Rojas, and the latest Marites version was Mar Rojas may have been even considered for DFA secretary. I don't believe that's the case, but so it also depends if Marcos Jr. is going to bring some elements from more liberal or progressive background into his own cabinet. That's also going to create some spark and some interesting dynamics. But so far, Marcos Jr., I think, has shown who's the boss, has kept the top position of the government with people that he feels most comfortable with. At the same time, he has avoided an all-out showdown with Sara Duterte or with Arroyo and other powerful women in the government. So I think so far he has done a pretty good job. I think generally the problem with BBM is that he's underestimated,
Richard,
and he's not taken seriously.
We also heard the name of Mar Rojas, but we're still waiting for the announcement if there will be one. But let me focus on messaging. 1 year in the office, President Bongbong Marcos still doesn't have presidential spokesperson. He answers a few questions, very limited questions from the media. How do you see this so far? Is it effective?
Yeah, I think it's not like Marcos Jr. did not try, right? Remember yung mga unang press con niya, tapos biglang he said, I disagree with that number. This was the inflation number, right? And medyo let's just be honest, there was a major communication faux pas there. And the problem is that the people that he trusts, like Paul Soriano, are not comfortable taking up that position. Now, I don't know if Harry Roque or former spokesmen are gunning for the position. I don't know about that, but I think President Marcos Jr. is still trying to find someone who feels can do justice to him and can take care of very difficult questions and criticisms that are coming from different quarters, whether it's former President Duterte, whether it's former President Arroyo, or liberal progressive members in government. So I think so far the strategy of Marcos Jr. was just play it safe. Let's talk fewer mistakes, right? So maybe it works. And I'll be honest, after 6 years of President Duterte's midnight, whatever you want to call it, press conference, I kind of appreciate the calm silence sometimes thing that we have had over the past 6 years. But you're right. At some point, President Marcos Jr. has to be more decisive, has to draw the line, and has to make some big moves. No? But my sense is, since the departure of Vic Rodriguez, his former number 2, he's still trying to find his footing. He's still trying to find the right grand coalition to push major policies forward. Yeah. So I doubt we'll see any major structural changes until midterms. Yeah. So that's 2025 onwards.
Yeah. Ikaw talaga, Richard, minamarites mo si Harry Roque. I think he's retired already.
Again, I said it's Marites. I'm not confirming it. I'm just saying.
Let him be. All right. Thank you for joining us tonight, UP Asian Center Senior Lecturer Richard Haydarian.
Up next, labor groups say the approved 40 peso wage hike in Metro Manila is still not enough, given the high prices of commodities. More on that when we return. Keep it here on One News. You're watching the big story here on One News.
Guys, parang panlilimos daw.
Ano
That's exactly how one labor group described what they say is a meager salary increase in Metro Manila. Recall that the Regional Wage Board added an additional 40 pesos to the minimum daily wage salary of 570 pesos. The Metro East Labor Foundation is one of the groups that filed a petition with the Regional Wage Board. Their desire is to increase the current minimum daily wage to 591 pesos. This is in order to reach the benchmark set by the Ibon Foundation study, which estimates that the family living wage should be at around 1,161 pesos per day. Other groups like the Partido ng Lakas ng Masa and the Bukluran ng mga manggagawang Pilipino are in favor of the salary increase. But they are more hopeful that Senate President Mig Zubiri's push for a 150 peso legislated daily wage increase for the entire country will be passed. On the other hand, the Philippine Amalgamated Supermarkets Association warned that there will also be an increase in the prices of goods if government decides to push through with a 150 peso wage hike.
Magsasarang maraming negosyo. I'm not kidding. No? Magbabawas ng tao. Mawalan ng trabaho ng ibang tao.
And with that wage hike in Metro Manila set to take effect on July 16, will other regions follow suit? Let's find out from Marian Enriquez. Maan, what do you have for us?
Sean, there's still no word on whether other regions will also see a wage increase, but senators have called on other regional wage boards to get similar wage hikes in their respective jurisdictions. Senator Coco Pimentel emphasized the urgency in reassessing current wage rates to ensure they are both reasonable and realistic for workers across all provinces. Citing data from the National Wages and Productivity Commission, Pimentel drew attention to the very low minimum wages in nearby regions, such as the 460 pesos for the non-agricultural sector and 430 pesos for agricultural workers in Central Luzon, as well as the 470 and 429 pesos for non-agricultural and agricultural workers in Calabarzon, respectively. Senator Jinggoy Estrada, meanwhile, said that the Senate Committee on Labor and Employment will conduct a hearing on the proposed 150 pesos across-the-board wage hike as soon as the session resumes this July. Sean.
Thanks for that, Marian Enriquez.
We're going to pause for one last quick break, but right after that, AirAsia Philippines has changed terminals over at NAIA. The details when the big story returns. Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here in One News. Well, heads up for travelers, specifically AirAsia travelers. The company recently announced that it would operate all of its domestic flights at NAIA Terminal 2 starting July 1st. That's tomorrow. AirAsia Philippines said it's setting NAIA Terminal 2 as its new Manila domestic hub while maintaining NAIA Terminal 3 for all its international flights. The airline, which currently operates domestic flights at NAIA Terminals 3 and 4, will utilize NAIA Terminal 2's 20 check-in counters and 4 online check-in kiosks at the south wing of the terminal. This is the final part of the Manila International Airport Authority's terminal assignments for airlines at NAIA. Along with the changes in Terminal 2, facilities have also been improved to ensure smooth and convenient service for passengers.
Tinanggal namin yung glass partition sa pre-departure. So magiging mas maaliwalas po ang pre-departure area natin, and we are adding more seats to accommodate po yung increase in passenger movement po natin.
Marami pa hong capacity na kailangang increase ang aming pong pasahero, and we need more aircraft. At sisiguraduhin po namin as early as now, right? Handang-handa na kami dyan.
Still in transport, the Asian Development Bank has approved a $1 billion loan to modernize the public transport system in Davao City. The ADB said the financing will support the city's procurement of about 1,100 units of electric buses. The project will also include the construction of bus stops with shelters as well as bus depots and terminals. The loan will be co-financed by the ASEAN Infrastructure Fund and the Green Climate Fund.
And before we go, time now for our big picture for the night. So I'm sure everyone knows, I think, what I'm leading in. And of course, excited for the comeback of TVJ and the rest of the legit Dabarkads. Check out this huge poster of Tito Vic and Joey outside TV5 Media Center right here in Reliance Center, Mandaluyong. Lots to look forward to tomorrow, so set your alarms for 11:30 a.m.
Wow.
Right, so that's just the outside. Have you seen what the
red? The better part of the building. I don't know if you can tell from the photo, but it's from the
top to bottom.
Top to bottom, yeah.
All 4 floors of
But
4
you have
media.
photos with the red ball.
I know, for the first time, di ba?
yes!
May laman na yung red ball.
Ako wala pa. So that'll be my target. First thing, tomorrow morning.
Oo, pero
Yeah.
nakita ko may ginagawa sila doon, Mase, pero hindi ko pa nakikita kung ano. Oh, may mga tao na
Surprise
nagsaselfie.
now. Even to us, they wouldn't say, right?
They wouldn't
Sabi-
say. I said, honestly, guys, we really don't know the name, but that's it for the show tonight. Gotta wait for tomorrow.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in and good night.